This video podcast is brought to you by OutFoxed Entertainment and viewers like you. If you'd like to support us, check us out at www.patreon.com/outfoxedit. Episode number 3. Become a Writer Today. Welcome to OutFoxed. I'm Oliver Evensen.
I'm Taryn, Brewer.
Awkward silence. I'm Levi Graham.
And I'm Hayden Wilson.
Awesome. And today we have a great podcast for you. We're going to be discussing a few really important questions that you should be asking yourself. And today we're going to start off with, why do you want to be a writer? When I first thought about why I want to be a writer, the first thing that pops into my head is money. And I thought to myself, well, it's not about the money, right? I mean, money is more easily earned in countless other professions. The next thing that came to my mind was, well, what about fame, right? You know, it's cool to be a writer. Well, the truth is, and you guys know this about me, I tend to like the shadows. At least I used to. They're filled with intriguing plots and schemes, and plus, I just don't like being in front of people. That wasn't my thing growing up, and so fame really wasn't clicking with me either. And so the more I thought about it, you know, as a young writer, I had D's in English, D's and F's actually. I felt like I couldn't hack it. And actually, I was often told that I was foolish for even trying. And so a big part of what drove me to write was to kind of prove, hey, you know, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to show you I could do this. But still, I feel like I had to dig deeper. My brother, Ethan, he actually lent me a copy of The Sword of Shannara. I think we all know that book by Terry Brooks. It's hardly my favorite fantasy book anymore, but this novel really revealed to me a new world that was filled with exciting new emotions. And for the first time, I really felt I truly was like enchanted. I was enchanted with the magic of books. And I think at that moment, I really knew that I wanted to write them. I felt like I wanted to help others feel the way I felt about books, particularly fantasy books. And I wanted to explore new worlds, exciting new characters, experiencing amazing trials and thrilling emotions, and just show people just how amazing it is to read these things and to be a writer. And honestly, that's why I'm a writer. What are your guys' thoughts? Why are you guys writers?
Because I don't want to work a desk job my whole life. Or I don't want to work in a cubicle. Even though that technically, one, you're right, you write at a desk.
Yeah, right.
Gosh darn it. No, jokes aside, kind of a similar situation with you, Oliver. I've always loved stories. I've always written stories. I remember way back when I was 8 years old writing a really crummy Harry Potter fanfic. I just love the concept of taking thoughts and ideas and kind of just that imagination and sharing it with other people. I have always loved hearing stories, even especially like campfire stories, you know, where you sit around and you tell the scary stories. I love horror. It was always kind of sticking with me. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. I mean, it's just something that's been lifelong to me, and it's something that gets me excited every time I sit behind a notebook or behind the word processor on my computer screen. You know, it's just like, all right, let's get these things out of my head and put them on paper.
I think I'll jump in next. Why do I want to be a writer? I know for myself, I've worked a few different jobs over my semi-short lifespan. I've just realized that's where I'm happiest is when I'm being creative. Growing up as a kid, I was always the artist kid. I was always the kid that did the drawings and stuff. And as I got older, I just shifted more because I realized even with my art, I was telling stories. I always had stories going in my head. So as I got older, like high school, I decided I was actually more interested in the English aspect of storytelling than I was just the art. So in college, I decided that was going to be my major. So for me, why I want to be a writer, I mean, as nice as it would be to be famous and have like your name on a book or sit in like puddles of money or whatever it is we think writers do, I think a lot of it is just I want that creative outlet and to constantly have that creative outlet because that's where I find I'm the happiest.
Oh, I like that. I feel like the money, the fame, if that comes, and I'm saying it is an if, right? If that comes, that's like icing on the cake, right? That's like, oh, that's great to have. But really, it's that creative process, right? That opportunity to create something new and bring someone into a new world and make them feel emotions that maybe they've never really felt before. It's vicarious living, I think is what they call that.
For me, I guess my situation is a little bit unique too. So I have a really good paying job. I work pretty good hours. I pretty much set my own schedule. For me, money is not my motivating factor at all. I would do these for free and sell them on Amazon. So fame doesn't apply to me necessarily either, as long as I know that people are taking something away. But for me, it's kind of an itch. There's something inside my mind that is just so annoying if I don't put it down on paper. I walk to work sometime from the front runner, and my entire walk, I'm just imagining stories, scenarios, things that I cannot let go. And every time I follow a certain path, every time I go somewhere, every time I drive home, every time I go to do anything, there is this constant itch that will not leave me alone until I put what's in my mind onto paper. For me, it's kind of like it's settling that itch. Once it's on paper, once it's out of my head, it allows my mind to settle and allows me to focus on the next task at hand, which I feel like is kind of like an addict in a sense where, yeah, you got your one fix, but that won't settle it because a week later I have a new idea, or I even go back to what I was working on and I have a new idea to throw in and give my characters a new scenario that I hadn't thought of, a different approach to it. It's kind of a need, a necessity, an addiction to actually get the thing out of my mind into other people's minds.
I love that. Not all writers experience that same itch. I've heard that before. An idea comes and they just have this desire to put that idea or that story onto the page. And that itch to write is what drives them and keeps them going. We kind of talked about the joy of creating, right? An itch to write and the exciting journey of creating a new world. That's kind of creating that thing. And also, sharing emotions. For me, I get a lot of joy out of sharing emotions with others. But really what I think it comes down to is it doesn't matter what your why is, so long as you know why you want to be a writer and you've taken a minute to figure out what is that true compelling reason why you want to write a book, why you want to write a novel. And I think once you know that why, you can use that why to drive you to keep going and to keep writing. Okay, well, let's go ahead and jump into our book critique portion of the podcast today. We're going to be reading and discussing Elantris, the prologue and the first line of chapter 1. And if you're anything like me, often you will skip the prologue and jump into the first chapter. So we're actually going to use that method today. We're going to read the first line of chapter 1, and then we'll jump back and we'll discuss that in a minute. And then we'll jump back into the prologue and see why these work or maybe why they don't work. We'll just see what everyone's opinions lie. I'll go ahead and read that first line. Here it is. Prince Raoden of Erelon awoke early that morning, completely unaware that he had been damned for all eternity. Okay, I'm going to open it up. What are your guys' thoughts on that sentence?
I think for me, it hooked me personally because I'm not a big Brandon Sanderson guys like you guys are. I haven't read all this stuff yet. I have not basked in the joy of the Cosmere as I should have, and maybe someday I'll repent, but it is not this day. But this was one I did read, and I remember that was what hooked me. The prologue that's there, not so much, but like you said, prologues are kind of a give or a take for me. They kind of just set a scene, like an opening scene of like a film. But that hook really got me when I was reading it, as compared to, say, I think Mistborn was the series I read first. And I remember it didn't have as compelling as a hook, though I did read the whole series and it's great. But this was the one I really liked, the hook sentence. And it was one where I knew it was a hook sentence and that it got me.
Yeah, right. It's, I mean, from a writer's perspective, this is very clearly grabbing you and pulling you into the story. It gets you really curious and interested, like, well, why has he been damned for all eternity? And if you've read the prologue, so you'll see why that sentence really connects well with the prologue. I'm interested, Taryn. Did you read that prologue first, or did you jump into the first chapter? I'm just curious.
For me, I always, if there is a prologue, I will always read it first. I
Okay.
consider it to be a part of the book. There's a reason they include it. Sometimes I don't, once I get through the prologue, I'm like, well, that was a sad waste of time. But for the most part, I get what they're trying to do with it. And this is one where it's not that long. So it doesn't feel
Oh,
like some
yeah.
people drag it out for chapters and you're just like, kill me.
Robert Jordan, anyone? I don't know if you Lord of Chaos.
That's who I was
Yeah.
thinking of. Oh, how did you do that?
Yeah. That. Why did you do that? I think he figured once you were into his series, you just keep reading. I just stopped at book 6. Sorry. See ya. Anyway,
Book
Go
11,
ahead.
that's about a lot too. That's where I'm currently at. 10. Yeah, they just constantly have large introductions. I think that first line is very powerful. What it does too is it's an obvious hook. You know, as a reader going in, it's almost like you know that they're supposed to hook you. You're the fish waiting for the bait, and there it is, and you can see that hook so obviously, but that bait looks so good, and you just cannot say no. You go, you take a bite, you read that first hook, and instantly it's over. You're in. So I mean, just kind of jumping back into the prologue too, is I love how short it is. It is very brief. What it does is there's world building in it. It really does just set up the world that they are going to live in I don't even know, 3-4 paragraphs. I mean, the book literally is called Elantris, and the first word is Elantris. That prologue for me is great because it is a promise of things to come. And essentially, I don't think Elantris is as much of an action fantasy as it is a mystery.
Yes.
And that literally goes into very first prologue. It's saying there was something that went wrong and nobody knows what happened. And you're like, okay, well, let me see what's going on. And then the first sentence of chapter 1, yeah, he's got it.
Well, it's interesting too. That first sentence, Elantris was beautiful once. That Elantris was beautiful. If you just take that first section, that's really not that interesting. But as soon as you add that comma and the once, it's like, oh, wait, it was once beautiful. Why? And you're suddenly asking questions, right? There's the introduction of the mystery, right? And then he immediately dives us in to the fantasy, right? Which admittedly with fantasy novels, the hardest, the biggest learning curve is getting into the magic and the setting and the world. And he immediately dives us in there with like short sentences, very interesting stuff. And just like you said, he really sets us up. He sets the stage for the entire book and what's going on in just a few short paragraphs. I love the beginning. Elantris was beautiful once. And it ends with eternity ended 10 years ago. And that eternity is key because then what happens in the first line, it ends with what? Damned for all eternity. And so just that little connection there, I don't know, for me, it just is like, whoa, that's so simple, but it works really, really well. To break it down for me, the things I see that he's done well is he's used short, very powerful sentences. He's introduced the magic system very early on and very simply so that we can understand it. He's introduced a mystery. Hayden, I haven't heard much from you. Do you have anything you want to add here?
Damn. That's what I thought my first time reading that line. I was like, oh, shoot, that's intense. That's a really strong opener. Well, how is he going to get undamned, or will he ever get undamned? And that's going to make me want to find out what's going on. I read the prologue and I see what this serves as. Yeah, it does mention a lot of interesting details about this world, but I think it serves to purely set the stage of this is what it once was. Now it's the opposite. Here you go. Get in and find out why.
So it's just immediately hooking you on that mystery and making you want to find out why. So and therefore you keep reading, you keep turning the page, right? One more thing I want to note about this before we jump onto the next thing is it's very common for me as a writer to begin with a character at the beginning of the scene waking up, or like, yeah, I think I do that way more often than I should. And it's funny, Raoden, that's the first thing he does at the beginning of the book. He wakes up, this very common thing we see at the beginning of scenes. It's funny, that sentence, Prince Raoden of Arlen awoke early that morning, it's almost by itself, it's really not anything amazing. It's the second half of that sentence, again, that makes that first part, so it makes the whole thing so interesting. And I just kind of want to draw it back to the first sentence of the prologue. Elantris was beautiful, which is a really kind of mundane sentence, until he adds that comma and throws in that word once. Isn't it? I don't know. To me, I just think that's a really interesting. It's not quite the same thing, but it seems to be there's some sort of technique there. I'm not sure exactly what to call it, but what do you guys think? Go ahead.
I'm gonna actually kind of segue in as a little thingy here to kind of go along with my point. When I sing the tune, da da dun dun, what does it make you want to do?
Da, 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 da. Right?
Precisely.
Yep.
So in music, when there's a certain kind of progression of notes that are played, they are called questions and they are called answers. So it kind of like is designed to kind of bring you along and expect the next part to come right after it. When I look at Elantris was beautiful once, or Prince Raoden of Arelon awoke early that morning, completely unaware that he had been damned for all eternity. It's kind of like that setup. Yes, it was, but this, yeah, it's something that causes pause, because that the comma, it causes pause, and it adds on that extra detail. It gives that expectation. It lets the reader wait on that bated breath. Wait, what? There's more. What's gonna happen? And then have it be a complete reversal of everything that happened. And that's, again, it's that dissonance, that juxtaposition in that description that causes all that intrigue, because we always want to figure out the source of the problem.
We've got 5 minutes left. Probably better talk about our writing homework and from our writer's toolbox. Today, as you noticed from our book excerpt, we talked about beginnings. So the exercise I want you to practice is practice writing hooks. Come up with 10 interesting opening lines. Then choose the one you like best and finish either the first scene, the first chapter, or the prologue. If you find the story interesting, you can continue with that story. Great, use it. If you don't find it interesting or you're not up to it, you can save it. That's key. Save it. I don't care if you don't like it, save it. Someday in the future, you might change your mind. Set aside and then go ahead and complete this exercise at least one more time. And one little pitfall I want you to look for is avoid flat exposition. And what that means is anything that's uninteresting. If you're not enjoying writing the hook or the beginning, then it's not going to hook your reader. Remember, the beginning is designed to hook the reader. If you're hooked, if you like it, that's a pretty good indicator that you're doing something right. Thank you all for coming. Any last thoughts, anyone?
Not tonight, but I think it's pretty much all been covered.
Sweet. Great. Well, once again, we appreciate you all for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to check us out on social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you'd like to support the podcast, please check us out at patreon.com/OutFoxed.